When I was 21 years old, I woke up at 3 a.m. and then I walked down the steps in our house, because I had noises. So I walked down. We have a house where there's downstairs and upstairs, and there was this long winding steps. So I walked down the steps, and then I looked on the last step, and I saw people sitting there, and they had long dreadlocks, and they were sitting there, and I looked on the lawn, and there was a whole lot of people that I didn't recognize. The light, the Coleman light in the villages, we use Coleman and lamps, was on, and then I looked around. I did not recognize the people there. So I looked down, I put my head like this, and then I looked, and I saw my father and mother sitting there. And they were talking to a man, right? They were talking to a man, and then I saw my father handing his guns, a shotgun and two 22 rifles. And he was handing them over, and I spoke in our language, and I said, "Ikobaro." Ikobaro means that, who are those people? And he told me, "I will tell you in the morning. Go back upstairs and sleep." That's one of the encounters in this book here, right? Firstly, before I start to give you some details of what happened, I would like to thank First Nations writers, especially Anna, for publishing my book, right? And I have come a long way. There was a time back then when someone wanted to publish my book, but the details that person gave me as my family, and they didn't want to do what that person asked to do. So I am very thankful to First Nations writers, Anna and her group, for publishing my book, and I'm acknowledging them. I wouldn't have come this far without my friend helping me to read my stories and give me ideas on how to progress. And I thank Ed Brumby. He's been my friend for a very long time. All right. I am a short story writer. This is the first time that I have published a book. Most of my work is based around short story writing. I am not here to talk about that. I am here to talk about my book. So, I was 23 years old when my father was assassinated in Bougainville. And in this book here, I tried to put the pieces together. There are so many things I left out because all I wanted was to focus on my father and me. I didn't want to upset any of my siblings in mentioning the things that happened to them. They all have their own ways to deal with what happened. And me, I have my own ways. When I came out of Bougainville, I was a really broken person. So writing helped me a lot. I was a great reader when I was growing up. I had a family where my parents were Christians, and they used to buy a lot of books for us to read. And most of these books were Uncle Arthur's bedtime stories. And I read a lot when I was growing up. And I used to write stories as well when I was in primary school. My mother was a teacher, and she taught me when I was growing up. So I used to write a lot of stories when I was a small girl. But it got intensive when I came out of Bougainville, and I didn't know how to deal with the loss. So I started writing poems, and it really helped a lot. One of the poems that I wrote has been read around the world, and it's here. I asked the First Nations if I can put it in the front page, and they did. So the poem is right here in front. It's It's called When Rifles Rain, all right? It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 stanzas, all right? And it's a poem that I dedicated to all the Bougainvilleans who lost their loved ones during the war. I wrote this book to shed light on Bougainville as well, to see Bougainville has really progressed from where it was. There is no mention of any other person or any other what is happening in Bougainville, but this book is, I would say, it's quite positive. I look back and I saw what happened between my father and I. We had this special connection that I could feel the things that were going to happen before it happened, and he felt it too. There was a last letter he wrote to me when he was in Rabaul, but I didn't put it in the book, right? I decided to keep it, but there is one last letter that is still with me that my father wrote to me when he was in Rabaul. All right, so this book here speaks about my growing up days, and there are two parts to it. I must thank our First Nations. They did a wonderful job. So the first part is fondest memories of my childhood, and it talks about my extended families, my school days, and me being a school teacher, how I went and I got training as a school teacher, and I went back to Bougainville. I was 20 years old when I graduated from a teacher's college, and then I went back to Bougainville. And the second part is when war rages in Bougainville. Father leaves for Rabaul. My father went to Rabaul he used to run a logging company, so he went to Rabaul to collect the royalties for the landowners. And when he was there, the blockade happened in Bougainville, and he couldn't come back, all right? And when he left, things were different. He was a very well-respected man in Bougainville. When he left to go to Rabaul, and when he was in Rabaul and the blockade happened, things got really intense, and he didn't realize that because he was outside. And he came in through the blockade, all right? So in part 2, War Rages in Bougainville, talks about the time when Father left for Rabaul, and then in 1993, when he came back, that's the time when the rebels got him. And it goes on to rest in peace. And there are 2 stories at the back of this book, 2 short stories I just put in there, in respect of my grandfather as well, who went as New Guinea Rifles to the highlands of Papua New Guinea. And in the progress, being in the New Guinea Rifles during the war, he got married to my grandmother, who is from the highlands. So in respect of that, he told me a story when I was growing up about a time when he saved an Australian soldier in the bushes of Simbu, I think. And I wrote that as a short story, but I put it at the end of this book because I know that young people will read this book, and then at the end they can have some, from the said memoir, they can have a read about my grandfather, which I highly respect. Rest in peace. And also, there's another short story at the end, and this short story is about what happened to my father. He was an orphan when, as he was growing up, he faced some difficulties in the village, and I wrote a short story about that as well, and I put it at the back of this memo. All right, so this story is about my father and myself, the connection that we have, and how I felt that something was going to happen to him before it happened. And it took me so many years, 33 years, to finally get the book out there. As I said, I have never wanted to publish this book here because I felt that I might upset my siblings and some other people, but then I decided, when I started writing it, I included a lot of things, but then I decided that I should just talk about my father and myself. So that's what I did. And it's not a, what will I say? It's not a sad memo. It's about the legacy of my father and how I remembered him. The front cover here is First Nations did a very fine job, and I am so thankful. When I saw this one, I was just like flabbergasted. I said, wow, this is awesome. Because I told Anna that I wanted my father, I can imagine my father is this age now. He should be in his late 70s or maybe 81 or so. And I said that I wanted us sitting in the forest lands because all my writing is focused around forest lands. And I use a lot of vivid imagery as well in my short stories, describing the trees and the landscapes and the mountains and the rivers, because that was the legacy that my father left behind. When I was growing up, he would take me to our forest lands and he would show me the land and say, this is our ancestral lands. And that is one of the things I really miss a lot these days when I've lived in Port Moresby, that I have no connection to my ancestral lands, and I'm not sure whether I will ever go back and connect to my lands. That's a question that has been bothering me a lot, because I lived outside of Bougainville for a very long time, and going back and adapting would be, I don't know, that's a question that keeps bothering me, but I am so connected to my lands, even from far off where I live. So when I write, I describe in vivid imagery the things I used to see when I was a young person back then. And my father used to take me to the forest lands, and he used to show me the rivers and the streams and the mountains. I'm from the mountains and the valleys of Bougainville, and he used to show me the lands that he owned there. So that's why I asked them if they could do the cover like that, and they did a really good job. And when I saw it, I was very happy in a sense that they did what I asked them to do. Let me tell you about one of the encounters in this book, and then I will stop. So we had a lot of, in 1992, I was 22 years old, and we had a lot of, what will I say? We always had people coming to our villages, the rebels, and they would harass everyone in the village, firing the guns very early in the morning, like 3 a.m., 2 a.m., and then we had to get out of the houses. But before they came, they were always scouts. They would tell us, people are coming, so you have to move out of the villages. So there was a time when my father was in Rabaul. We were by ourselves. It's all in here, but that's one of the encounters that back then, I thought that I would never make it out of Bougainville, but somehow I did. So they told us that the rebels were coming, all right? Now, let me clarify on the rebels as well. Bougainville was fighting for a good cause, but during that time, there were people who took advantage, let's say opportunities, who just went around slaughtering people that they were not supposed to. So during that time, they told us, people are coming, so you have to move out into the forest lands. I'm always glad going into the forest lands. So our mother took us, and then we went to our gardens, and then there was a mountain there that my father owned that mountain, the land totally, all around the mountain, the land belonged to him. And it was surrounded by a creek, and when we went to the gardens, my mother said, we'll have to go to the mountainside, and then we'll make our camp there. Since my family are Adventists, they always go out for Pathfinder camp, so we always have tents. So we went there, and my mother had the larger tent, and she was with my small brother and one of my cousins, and my sister and I decided to use one of the tents. And we just camped beside that creek, and then as we camped for the night, it started to rain. And it just rained all throughout, and by 3 a.m., the water was coming down from the mountains, and then our tents floated. I have never forgotten that. And I was standing there with my backpack, and I was holding this coconut oil lamp in the glass. I stood there because the floor of the tent was soaked. So my sister was about 12, I think, and she just sat at one corner. What else can we do? It was so dark because it was in the forest and there was this creek on the side. So I just stood there until it was morning time. And I had these thoughts running through my mind. Man, I hate this war. And I was thinking that, I was so hungry. I can still remember. And I was like, man, what I would do to have chips and chicken right now. Maybe a coffee. I was thinking like that, all right? Just standing there, and I have never forgotten that. And then this thought came to my mind, maybe I will never make it out of this island, all right? I will never make it out of this island. And then in the morning, when the sun came up, all the darkness changed. And then the forest came alive, and there were birds here and there, and it kind of just slipped out of my mind what I was thinking about the other night when it was so dark and the rain was falling and the water was cascading down from the mountains and the small creek flooded as well. It just kind of slipped out of my mind, and then I looked across. I saw how beautiful and lush and green the forest was, and then the river went down. It was just flowing smoothly. So that was one of the encounters that has always been in my mind. When I tell my kids about forest lands, they don't understand because they've never been into any forest. They live in the concrete city of Port Moresby, concrete jungle, we say. So it is something that I felt that was the legacy that my father left behind. And it has blessed me so much that when I write my stories, I focus on forest lands. Thank you so much for listening.